Well, here I am, Gridlock, here to save my friends. And Otter. So let's get this started. What's challenge 1, jerk?
Hurry and get us out of here. The blood's going to my head. I'm getting delirious, and he's been playing the same irritating song over and over again. Take me now, Grim Reaper!
That fiend!
Very, right on time. I admire that. Fine, your first challenge will be to review something boring and from the 90s. You will review Hanna-Barbera's The Adventures of Robin Hood.
Okay, Walrus, you can do this. Starting with the technicals. Young Robin Hood was an Adventure of the Day show that was produced by Hanna-Barbera and was made specifically for syndication and ran from 1991 to 1992. A Hanna-Barbera show that only lasts one season. What a shock. It has the cast every interpretation has. You have the titular Robin Hood, who in this version is a borderline Gary Stu nobleman who rebels until King Richard the Lionhearted returns. The ironically named Little John, who is supposedly the Zolo to Robin's Luffy, but is way too boring for that. Friar Tuck, except he's too young to be a friar, so they just call him Brother Tuck. And yes, he is the fat eater of the group. A hopeless romantic bard that every Robin Hood needs named Alanadale, Maid Marian, who plays the role of spy and is just as bland as her romance partner, and in this version, they add an annoying, tag-along young kid character named Will, and an animal sidekick, a hawk named Arrow. I can't begin to explain how boring this show was to sit through. Like in episode 1, The Wild Boar of Sherwood. In this episode, the tag-along character goes to the Merry Man's hideout and states that he needs help. The sheriff will take his father's business and lock him up if he doesn't come up with his tax money. Only for the Wild Boar to have followed the tag-along to the hideout, because of course it did. Then the boar and the Merry Man have a series of unfunny shenanigans. So apparently the Wild Boar has become such a nuisance that is making trade between Nottingham and the neighboring towns hard. So there is a reward on his head, and Tagalong sees this as an easy way to keep his family's business afloat. But Robin and crew stop him, saying that the boar is a free spirit like them and that he can't kill it. And I'm calling bull on this. While I'm an animal lover who genuinely feels that we need to be doing more for the environment and reverse man-made climate change, the boar has made such a nuisance of itself that it's interfering with trade and the local economy, and the sheriff actually put a bounty on its head. That and the fact that the boar clearly has no fear of humans means that it isn't even a wild boar, but a domestic pig that escaped and went feral, which makes it dangerous because it's associated people with food its whole life. So yes, as sad as it is, the boar needs to be turned into honeyed ham. That said, let's continue. After releasing the boar and assuring Tagalong that they will think of something, they hear the sheriff's huntsman's horn and scramble to save the boar. Where we cut to the sheriff and his main henchman, whom is the weasel suck-up henchman that every 90s cartoon villain has, assures the sheriff that their top hunting dog, a scary-looking mastiff, will track down the boar. Only for the boar to show up out of nowhere and ram him. And I think we know where it's gonna go from here. The tag-along helps the sheriff in exchange for the money, only for the sheriff and Mr. Weasel to not keep their word, and for Tag-along to have a change of heart and help Robin save the pig. If you guys had any idea how boring this was to sit through, my god. Now, predictability is not necessarily a bad thing. Everything boils down to execution, but this was so predictable. The tag-along's voice is annoyingly grating. As you can see from the clips I've been using, the animation is pretty decent for TV-grade animation made during the 70s, except that it was made during the 90s, so it's unacceptable even by Hanna-Barbera's low standards. I don't think that was good enough. Go over another episode, or that perish. Fine. Let's drive right into my suffering for your sick amusement by looking at episode 5, The Black Bog of Sherwood then, which is pretty much a Scooby-Doo plot. And yes, even though it was made during the 90s, a decade where no new Scooby-Doo cartoons were airing, Hanna-Barbera was still ripping themselves off by having other shows rip off Scooby-Doo. Anywho, on with the episode. We start our story with our merry band of bland annoyances setting up for an ambush for a tax shipment, only for it to be a trap set set up by the sheriff to catch them, only for Robin and crew to be overwhelmed and be chased into the black bog. And if I could digress here for a moment, this scene has some of the most wooden, inorganic sounding voice acting I have ever heard. Here, take a listen.
Let's not stick around to get stung.
It's time to duck out of here.
Anywho,
You can't go Walrus Review without saying that word, can you?
no, I can't. Anywho, after they get chased into the bog, the sheriff stops the chase, seeing how this place is haunted and no one has ever come back alive. After some unfunny shenanigans, we cut back to Prince John monologuing about how this brings back good memories about when he banished his old tutor there. And this isn't any kind of lazy foreshadowing of who the guy in the mask at the end of the episode is going to be at all. After that, we get back to Robin and crew starting a campfire talking about the swamp monster that totally isn't going to turn out to be the banished royal tutor at all, where it's established that the tag-along is a paranoid idiot who is going to be the instigator of everyone else in the party save Robin believing in the swamp monster. Then we yet again cut elsewhere. Maid Marian is talking to the wise old fart every show like this has to have that I forgot to mention in the character bio named Hagala. Marian talks about how they need to get Robin and crew out of the bog, only for the old crone to dump some exposition about the backstory of the tutor because apparently they were friends back in the day, and this totally isn't more foreshadowing about how the tutor is the swamp monster at all. After more unfunny shenanigans, Robin and crew run into Maid Marian, who went to find her friends despite Hagala's protest. Only for the monster to finally show up, they rig a Scooby-Doo trap only to find out that the tutor was alive the whole time and using the swamp monster getup to scare people off because he didn't want anyone to see him in his current state, aka one step above devolving back into being an animal. After Robin and friends clear things up with the tutor and promise to help him rejoin society, they used a swamp monster costume to pull off their own Scooby-Doo scam and scare the guys guarding the tax money into abandoning their posts. While it wasn't one-to-one, it was clearly a Scooby-Doo rip-off episode. Are we almost done here?
Is there anything else you'd like to address before the wrap-up?
I can't speak for everywhere else, but here in the States, most cartoon intros can be broken into two categories: having a catchy theme song to help you get pumped up and excited to watch a show, or having a lazy exposition dump explaining who the characters are and what the show's premise is. I bring this up because this show's intro falls into neither. They just have the show's main score with the cast having a weird back and forth saying their names without saying anything else about the show. Here's a snippet so you guys can see for yourselves.
Just playing for time. I'm Marion.
And where there's a way, there's a will. Squall, that is.
Right on the money. From the rich to the poor.
It's weird. It feels like they were too lazy to even write an exposition dump, so they just reused the lines the voice actors read to audition for the parts and reused them. Put background music behind it and called it a day, which is fine if you're already familiar with the Robin Hood story, but ever since we live in a world where flat earthers are a thing, you can't expect anyone to know anything about the story you're adapting, even one as old and as well known as that of Robin Hood. In closing, this was forgettable trash. The characters were stuck in one dimensional at best, the animation looked like 70s grade television animation despite being made in the 90s. How this got to share a time slot with Pirates of Dark Water when it reran on Cartoon Network back in the day astounds me, and I remember being bored slogging through each episode as a kid back then, and I was bored watching it now. There, you lackluster loser lagomorph! I did it! What's next?
Next to the review, enchanted.
Oh, crap.
The kids were rattling in their cage, all crying out in fits of rage. I kidnapped them a week ago last spring. They bitched about their hunger pangs, started biting each other with teeth and fangs. And I said, whoa, now there's no need for that. Hey, I know just the thing. I threw them all in a bag, tied the bag to my truck, and behind it they dragged all the way to the best cafe in town.
best place around. It's time to feast on polar bears and bats and goats. Let's eat the zoo. Let's force a hippopotamus down your throat. Let's eat the zoo. There ain't no better meal than a three-toed sloth with electric eels, or an alligator sauteed in kangaroo. Come on, children, let's eat the zoo.
Oh, 80 place. Here we go with a round two of the adult being. It is super hard for 20 seconds. Like, comment, subscribe, click another video, etc.